Welcome to The Heart of the Matter, an Our Place podcast, where we look at the issues surrounding homelessness, addiction, and mental health on the streets of Greater Victoria. Welcome to Heart of the Matter, an Our Place podcast. Today's special guest is Our Place's board chair, Margo Goodhand. Welcome, Margo.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So one of the first questions I have is, you became the new chair of the Our Place board, the AGM. Could you describe to our listeners what this important role is about?
I have an amazing board of about 12 people. I actually took charge in January. Alan Saunders is the past chair. And I had a couple of years with him, watching him do the job, and he taught me lots. And we work closely with the CEO, Julian Daly, who we admire and trust and respect greatly. So it's kind of a lovely relationship. He's really our only employee. So we are a governance board, and he manages Our Place, and we are apparently managing him. It works. It works very well. I've really enjoyed working with him just the last couple of months. I had a huge respect for him in Edmonton when he ran the Boyle Street Mission, and he has always been, a man of integrity and compassion, which are the two things that I think are the most important aspects of running this organization. So yeah, our job is to kind of listen to him and hope that, and I guess it's all governance. It's all supervision, monitoring, assessing risks, that kind of stuff. And but it is an incredibly wonderful board which always reads their packages before the meetings, and which always has something to say, and it comes from a whole bunch of different walks of life. So it's been actually a really great experience for me.
Well, that's great to hear. I think a lot of people might be surprised to know that the board of directors is a volunteer position. Just like all the volunteers that help us out around Our Place, operating all the sites, the board of directors were also volunteers. What interested you in volunteering for the Our Place board?
I was looking for something to do when I came to Victoria. I really wanted to learn more about the community, and I wanted to get more involved. And so I did look around at different areas that I could do. I have a board governance course. I'd been in a lot of boards in Winnipeg and in Edmonton. But homelessness has always been kind of near and dear to my heart. One of the first boards I was ever on was the Winnipeg Poverty Reduction Task Force. And it was my first real experience as a board member. And we just met, we met and we ate sandwiches, and I thought it was useless. It just didn't seem to go anywhere. Good-hearted people, but we didn't go anywhere. And so I think I finally got frustrated with the whole thing and decided that we should have our own homelessness task force. And so in 2012, me and a couple of people from that particular board morphed into the Winnipeg's first homelessness task force, because nothing had been done like that before. And I thought it was much more hands-on than being an anti-poverty task force. It didn't seem to work very well. So anyways, yeah, that stemmed from my respect for what was happening in Edmonton and Calgary at the time. And so it is an issue that's very near and dear to my heart. And when I found Our Place, it was perfect. So I've been on the board for about 6 years.
Excellent. And I know that, prior to this, in your former career, you were a journalist. You were editor-in-chief of the Edmonton Journal, but all the steps that come before that as well. And what changes have you seen over the years when it comes to how media looks at or addresses homelessness and addiction?
Well, you're a journalist too, Grant, and I think you know as well as I do that we always kind of follow the stories, right? It is the stories that matter. And so I think, any journalist worth their salt cares about, telling a good story and the people that are out there. I've always been amazed, especially when I'm at Our Place, talking to the people there, of how we're really 1 degree of separation. We're 1 minute away from being in the same spot, and it is their resilience, it's their sense of who they are and what they want to do and be is, often kind of inspiring to me. That so yeah, it is just kind of reaching out. I don't think there's ever been I think there are some right wing media that treat the homeless as though they're not really people. They're just something that we need to get off the streets because we don't want to see them anymore. But I haven't had that reaction here. I think the media here is tremendous, and was in Edmonton and Winnipeg as well.
Yeah, I was just interviewing Normand for the next newsletter. He's kind of known as the poet on the streets, and him telling his story. And it always strikes me every single time I talk to one of the family members about their story, how different every journey is that leads them, to be on the streets or needing the supports of our place, but how successful a lot of them are, which is why I write those stories, because it's not always easy to capture that people can be successful. But it always amazes me, and I mean, there's certain threads that run through abuse and trauma being one of them. Tends to be a road that leads to addiction and, untreated mental health issues, stuff like that. But it's definitely those stories. As a former journalist, of course, I love those stories, but it's telling those stories that is so important.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It really is. Yeah.
And also in 2017, you published the nonfiction novel Runaway Wives and Rogue Feminists, the origins of the women's shelter movement in Canada. What inspired that novel, and what did writing it teach you?
I have always wanted to write a book. It was one of my goals. I know you've written many, but I've always wanted to write one book, and I wanted it to be a true story, and I wanted it to be about women. And I was talking to my sister who ran a battered women's shelter, that's what they were called then, in Swift Current, Saskatchewan. And she said, well, isn't that interesting? Because I've always thought somebody should do a history of the Women's Shelter Network because it's relatively new. It began in the early 70s, and none of these women have been able to, to do any kind of chronology or history of what they've done because A, they're too busy getting the job done, and B, they're under-resourced, and C, they don't blow their own horns. And I thought, oh, isn't that fabulous? Because I think I can do this. And we started to look into the first shelters because that was the only way I could really get my teeth into it, was to try to do the first ones, and found all these founders out there that were still alive and kicking, writing letters to the editor, complaining about things and standing on picket lines. And I thought they were amazing. We toured across Canada and I interviewed them. So again, it was a piece of journalism, but it was also a piece of history, and a very weird slice of history because again, women's history is not well known, and this is a quintessential women's story where women, feminists from the 70s, got together and decided that they needed to do something about domestic violence, and they needed to create a shelter network, which now stretches across Canada. There's 650, and every time they build a new one, it's full. So it's not as though the issue has gone away. It's kind of like creating a runaway or a underground railway for a lot of women and families. But over the years, it's saved many, many lives, and it's changed trajectories for families in a really wonderful, transformative way. So on one hand, it's a bad news story because it is like food banks because they're growing, but it's also a good news story because these women are still phenomenal, still alive, and inspirational. So it was a lot of fun to write.
That's good. Yeah, I know that COVID kind of showed us how that need is still not being met. We've seen so many more sort of women end up on the streets, whether fleeing domestic situations or just being renovated and ending up, and a lot of senior women as well. Yes. It shows that it's a continuing need, and something that we still have a big fight still in us to get more space for women, for sure.
Yeah, on one hand, you've got to be happy for this, the safety network for what it is, and the creation of it was phenomenal. It is an amazing achievement. because at the time nobody even thought there was a need for it. I remember one woman told me that a guy stood up at a city hall meeting and said, "Well, if you build that, my wife will leave me." I thought, well, maybe she needs to.
Absolutely.
But it was just, you're ruining the family. You're ruining the family home. And this doesn't exist. This issue doesn't even exist. So, yeah, they were fighting on a lot of fronts. And again, sometimes when you're creating change, it's hard to do that. I do appreciate the fact with our place that the need is recognized, that there is a very strong sense of this has to be done. And the staff are and the volunteers are so committed to creating a safe, open space for people that I'm super proud of the whole organization.
How do you see the current state of affairs when it comes to homelessness?
I worry. We did talk about the right wing media. I worry about a split in the way things are being perceived. That the more tense there are, the more afraid people seem to be on the streets. And Victoria is a very small town, and I walk home in the dark all the time from downtown. I think it's beautiful, and I just don't ever not feel safe. But there is that perception for people who don't maybe go downtown that often that this is something to be afraid of. And I've never been afraid of poor people. I think the whole idea of poverty and of homelessness is not something to push away. And it's something that you need to accept and do something about. So yeah, there's that. I'm disheartened sometimes by commentaries in the media that talk about how these are cesspools of criminal activity. It just there's a certain amount of othering that bothers me, and I think if those people that were writing those things actually came to our place and talked to the people and served them a meal and had some interaction, they would not have that sense of fear and hostility. And that's what's driving a lot of that.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite moments was, because we do that sponsor a meal program at our place where businesses can come in, pay for the meal and serve it. And I remember a bank manager who brought in his team, and he comes in, he's in his three-piece suit, as you would expect. And he said he'd never been to our place because he was afraid of coming down to Pandora. And he came in and, once he started serving the meals and he got to hear quite a lot of bad jokes and stuff like that, and he was laughing and connecting with the people. And afterwards he said to me, like, this was just so eye-opening. I didn't really look at the family members as real people.
As people, yes.
It just completely changed his perception. And I think that's where the work is. That's where the continuous work is trying to change those perceptions.
Absolutely. And that's why you keep telling those stories, Grant, because it's so important to make people realize these are people. Yes.
Yeah. Have there been any real eye-opening moments in your role with our place?
Yeah, I've had a couple of amazing encounters with people. At the Easter lunch, I met this wonderful woman who had a great idea for a fundraising day on Pandora, open up the streets, have music. She was great. But the most profound one was at the coldest night of the year. I was heading in, we were going to do the walk, and this woman gets out of a car, and she's got there's a baby in the back, and her daughter's in the front seat. And she says, "I'm just here because I want to put some money towards our place, and I want a hat." She wanted one of the toques. And I said, I said, "Sure, come with me." And we walked up to the registration table. And as we walked, she started telling me this story. She said, "My daughter died last month. And her name was Talitha." And she said, I'm so glad that you guys are out there for her. I'm glad that you were there for her. She always talked about our place being important to her. And then she wanted to give us some money. And I just stopped. It was just brutal because I felt so sorry for her. I had no idea, and it really had just happened a couple of weeks before. So anyways, I we talked a little bit longer. She showed me a poem about drug addiction and, you know, how hard it is. And to be a grieving family member, I shared with her my own story, and she was lovely. And in the end, I got two toques for her. I gave her one for her daughter in the car and one for her. And I carried Talitha with me that whole walk. But again, we were walking with some constables, Delmanac and some constables who work with our place, and they both knew Talitha. They both knew her. And they said that one really hit hard. And I just remember thinking how, you know, how the whole drug addiction issue on the streets is just becoming so devastating. Everyone's being touched by this. And, you know, anyways, yeah. So Talitha, I carry her with me.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times when people are looking in the news and they hear about the deaths of the street, they don't quite connect that with real people, with real stories. You know, I mean, I see our staff, our housing staff and our shelter staff, and was it just the other week there, we had 3 deaths within 3 days, and everybody had a connection with them. I mean, it wasn't just a number. It was really devastating. These are people that they come to care about, and we're working hard with them to, you know, try and improve their lives. And then, you know, this toxic drug supply and they're gone. You know, it really does hit hard.
Oh, I can't even. Yeah, I feel so sorry for the staff because they are dealing with it on a daily basis, and that grief and trauma is just hitting everyone hard. But yeah, and you know, when even the police officers were going, oh yeah, that one was really hard to handle. You just realize that is a constant in the lives of the people who work at our place and on the streets. It's a scourge. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, when I started at our place 10 years ago, you know, we saw 1 or 2 ambulances a week. Mostly that was to do with people going into alcoholic seizures. You know, the drug of choice a lot of it was alcohol at that time. Heroin, of course, was around and stuff like that, but it just wasn't as noticeable. And now the ambulance is there several times a day, and a lot of times it's to try and save someone's life. You know, or Narcan hasn't worked because some of the new drugs are mixing in with fentanyl. The Narcan doesn't always work, and it's to take somebody away who's, you know, who would have lived years before, you know, if it had just been the regular supply. It's crazy. So I know the board, you know, as a governance board, is looking at the strategic plan for the next 4 years coming up. And where do you see the future of our place heading? Or where would you like to see it heading?
I love the way it's going. I think that what we've noticed, I mean, we used to just feed people, right? It was a drop-in center, and we fed people, and it was a wonderful ministry. And imagine how it's come so far that now we're giving people work skills. We're building their resumes. You know, I worked at Next Steps, and now it's our workplace. And I remember just seeing the transformation in a couple of weeks of people that took the course, you know, and ended up getting jobs for the first time in years. So there's that piece of the puzzle. Then there's, you know, New Roads, which is so exciting because it's a therapeutic recovery center that is taking people that, you know, have severe issues, and at the end of their stay, it's a long-term stay program with intense therapy. At the end of their stay, they're coming out, and again, our place is providing them with a house that they can live in, and they can move into the community. And, you know, it is this, we call it a continuum of care. And I know I've heard you say it before, where you start with the food, you start with giving them a sense of hope and belonging and community. And then you walk with them as they go through, you know, all of the work that they have to do to become, you know, to I don't know, to fit into society, or for what it's worth. But there is that sense where our place has just become this continuum from one end of the spectrum, you know, mats on a floor, to, you know, to a permanent housing site. The one on Albina is just phenomenal. We've never had that before. So, you know, and our staff, which is about as nimble and compassionate as you can get, just seems to be able to kind of go as we keep getting these opportunities. Again, I have to give credit to I haven't given it yet, but I'm going to. I give credit to the province because I've really genuinely noticed that this province is really working hard on these issues. It's there's tons of things that they could be missing out on, but I have a deep respect for the way they are approaching this whole complex issue, and providing people with places to sleep and places to go and places to find ID, and all of that stuff is being provided by us, but a lot of it's being funded by this province as well. So no, especially through the pandemic, I thought they did a remarkable job in a real crisis to get people off the streets and into some help and stabilizing. And it could have been such a disaster. Like, all I could think, I remember, when COVID first reared its head, I thought, oh no, there's going to be these multiple deaths on the street, and it's going to spread like wildfire, and these vulnerable people, and it's one of those stories that didn't happen, and I actually credit the governments for pulling together and figuring something out, and I can't thank them enough for that.
Well, it sounds like you've got some hope for the future.
Always. Always, but I mean, our place gives me hope too. I think that the more time I spend with this organization, the more hope I get, because I do see a lot of good things coming out of it. So yeah.
And that's one of the things that I love is that, I've said this in the past, but everybody that works at our place, when I'm, and the volunteers as well, and when I'm connecting with them, they're a very positive bunch. And unlike some of my previous jobs, there's sort of no egos in the room.
Yeah.
Because we're all serving the family members, and that's our focus, there's really no ego. It doesn't matter what your position is. Everybody's sort of on an equal footing, because we're all what do you call that, pushing in the same direction.
Yeah.
To serve the family. And I think that comes across really broadly.
And service is a great word, right? It is exactly that. There is no, I get that from Julian. So from top down, I think that, and one of his goals was that, he was going to have more lunches and dinners with the family members, because he thought that he was getting away from that. And, it was one of the things that the women's shelters talked about. As they became more institutionalized, it was them and us. So the women who were looking after the women in the shelter were not having meals with them anymore, or they were, and it was just, they became unionized or something. There just became more of a gulf between the two. I've never seen that with our place. I think that there's always a sense of camaraderie it's one family, and family is the word that they use. And I think it's important that we keep saying that it is what it is.
That's great. So for our listeners who have never participated on the board of a community organization, what can you tell them about how they can help lend their professional expertise by joining a board of governors or volunteering with a local nonprofit?
We are always looking for good board members. Greg Connor is our board chair of governance, and he's always looking for them. So it's not a matter of how deep your pockets are. It's really, sometimes it's your expertise. We look for, legal or financial. Sometimes they're the hardest ones to find. But, it's anybody who really cares about the community and cares about this issue and is willing to put in the time. We meet once a month and we go through these, we review what's happening. And it is a gift, I think. To serve it. I also find as a volunteer board, it's remarkable how much time that people do put into it. But any volunteer job at our place is worth the time. I'll never forget our workplace practicum. I think I did it for about 2 years, and I was so very sad when I had to give it up, because you get to, you get to really know the people, and you see them evolve, and you get to, help them, and you get to, it just, there is just no downside to volunteering at our place. So either, you do it on the board level or you do it on a different level, but there are many, many, many positions, and we're open all the time to people to come down, and I hope that people do that.
Well, thank you very much for your time today, Margo. Is there anything I missed? Anything you want to add?
No, it was brilliant. Thank you very much for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You've been listening to the Heart of the Matter podcast. For more information about our place and the vital programs and services provided to the Greater Victoria community, please go to www.ourplacesociety.com. Our Place is a registered BC charity. You can donate by visiting the website or by calling 250-940-5060. Help us to bring hope and belonging to those in need.